Good morning, VC. Welcome to my house. Mazzy here. So, let's talk about the Harrison family. I'm wearing my Danny Harrison t-shirt. That's son of George, who has an interesting career. He had a band for a while, or project, as the kids say these days, called the New Number Two, that put out some indie records. And then he put out an album, and where the fuck is it? Probably with Beatle family and friends here, because that's what I do. It's kind of an interesting album. This one came out in parallel last year. Beautiful record. I saw a little electronic, indie, rock and roll, modern, techie, but psych somewhat. He's into the music. Him, and in terms of the Beatle kids, him and Sean with Claypool Lennon and the saber-toothed tiger with his girlfriend do interesting things opposed to the other. The irony is, in my opinion, Paul's son James is a bit of a failure at it. Sorry. And he's actually has a great opening gig. This, good or bad, whatever you think, he's opening up the world tour, or at least this year, for ELO, because in a way, Jeff Lynne's sort of his uncle, right? Worked with George, Papa George. There you have my George Harrison vinyl box set that weighs a ton. This is the George Harrison section on vinyl. It starts here, and it goes. Of course, I didn't prepare this, did I? Very well. It goes all through to here. And we talked the other day about the Concert for George, which is the tribute concert that I went to at the Royal Albert Hall in 2 years after he passed away. So that would have been 2003. 2002. A year after he passed away. So November 2002. Beautiful, beautiful show. These are some of my Genesis books. I Me Mine. Genesis book is Genesis is a publisher out of England that used to do original kind of limited edition, leather bound, hand pressed and assembled books of like Moby Grape and Moby Dick. God, I didn't want to say Dick maybe, but Moby, not the San Francisco psychedelic band, but Herman Melville's Moby Dick. Anyway, they did very scholarly works of limited edition, library editions, and collector edition books. And then George Harrison met Brian Rolance, the publisher, in the late 70s, I believe, and in 81 did the first rock and roll book, I Me Mine. And I Me Mine and Songs by George, Volume 1 and 2, are books. I Me Mine was an autobiography. Later came out in a regular edition. But I Me Mine was a book, basically his autobiography, close to it. They're numbered, signed editions. I think there's only 2,000 copies. I think at the time they were like $250, $300. A lot of money in 1981. A lot of money now, but for a book. But now they sell for $3,000-$4,000 depending, because obviously you can't get George's signature anymore. But I collect a lot of these Genesis Beatle books. Maybe sometimes I'll do a video on that. But a lot of people. Obviously, you all know his records. Probably this is considered George's best album, 3-record set, two main records, and then a Apple Jam record. And it's of course, it's a beautiful album. I mean, talk about pent-up demand, pent-up songwriting. Out of the gate, he just blew the other Beatles away. And it's probably considered, if not the first, in the top 3 greatest Beatles solo records. One of my favorite records, though, of his is the soundtrack he did, Wonderwall music by George Harrison. And those of you who've been watching my channel know that I love Indian music. And this is a great hybrid of Indian music, psychedelic, electronic space stuff. Eric Clapton does a few riffs on it. There's some ukulele playing, some almost like cowboy music. But in honesty, this is like my second or third favorite George Harrison record. So that's Wonderwall music by George Harrison. And I have, that's an import English copy, and I got the original, my original US. And this one is what a lot of people like to tell people they hate. Electronic sounds, basically two pieces. It's George Harrison doodling at Frere Park, his estate, on a Moog synthesizer. And he did it with Bernie Krause from Beaver and Krause electronic team. Bernie Krause later kind of attacked George, thinking he was there showing him on how to use the machines, and they're just fucking around with the Moog synthesizer. And George all of a sudden puts it out on an album. His name is kind of down there. I think it's on the original copies. You can kind of see Bernie Krause written there. I think Bernie had a problem with this. But this was on the Beatles' parallel offshoot experimental label, Zapple Records. And it really is just Moog synthesizer doodling. I happen to like it. I put it on once in a while. In fact, that would have been something to put on in the background now. I don't know if that would get a copyright hit or not. There was a remix version of All Things Must Pass a few years ago, or maybe 10 years ago, just before George passed away. He did. Not as successful. He does the vocals on My Sweet Lord, or the remixes My Sweet Lord and everything else. And the only nice thing about this, there's some outtakes, additional track. Oh, there's a 2000 version of My Sweet Lord. Color cover. It's kind of like Ted Turner colorizing black and white movies. So I don't think it's successful, but as a collector, you got to have it. And then you go with all his records. I'd say, love this cover. Again, a spiritual. This was a follow-up. Living in the Material World was a follow-up to All Things Must Pass. Another fine record. Some people didn't like it because of the overt religious preaching in a way. But the thing about George, I'm not a religious guy at all, and I have total respect for people who are into religion, and probably not the best subject to come across here. I just hate when people try to sell their religion or their religious beliefs on anyone else. Have the spiritual sense, believe in your God or no God, and just do it. I better stop there, right? Because I know I probably have a lot of VC friends who feel otherwise, but so be it. Now, Dark Horse, problematic. 1974, George Harrison did his concert tour, his first solo concert tour, and the first opening part of it was Ravi Shankar, which I loved, because again, I love Indian music. Some people in the audience were impatient about it, but I thought it was pretty amazing. He puts out this record, okay? And I can't remember which order. They changed it, because George Harrison, this was the first edition. See that, how small that is? This Swami Yogi there. And then George wanted it larger. So there's two different editions here. Obviously, this one has hype sticker. Includes a hit, Dark Horse, Ding Dong, Ding Dong, Far East Man. Far East Man was a song that George actually tried to give to Frank Sinatra. Sinatra wasn't having it. But he recorded this record in this tour when his voice was totally messed up. Hoarse, so a lot of people like to joke Dark Horse, H-O-A-R-S-E. He should have postponed the tour, postponed the record. If you listen to Dark Horse's song, plus a lot of the songs, his voice is gone. It's shot. It's throaty. Extended cocaine use and other issues. And come on, postpone it. What's that about? His only tour, except years later, he did a tour in Japan only with Eric Clapton. But still, Ding Dong Ding Dong has become one of those great New Year's Eve songs. So it's still a good album. You just kind of wish he had the vocal sheen to do it right. I got several copies and reissues. This was a reissue, a later, when they, budget, when they take off the cover and they put this on the cover. So this is a budget version of Dark Horse. They took the back cover image and put it on the front cover, and took the inserts. And it's a copy, $3.99, new, sealed. Then there is Extra Texture, possibly his weakest album, although You is a great song. It's a great kind of single. That was the single. World of Stone, his Gray Cloudy Lies, Tired Midnight Blue. This Guitar That Can't Keep From Crying, which is a little bit of a homage to While My Guitar Gently Weeps. Not a great record, but when you're a completist, and we all bought it back then in the day. Then he leaves his Capitol Records for all those years, Apple Records, and gets his own imprint, Dark Horse Records, on Warner Brothers Records, and puts out 33 1/3. This was actually had a number of hits. Had Crackerbox Palace and this song. This song was his response to being sued by the publisher of He's So Fine by the Chiffons because of My Sweet Lord. It was later reversed. He said, look, there's a lot of songs like that. In fact, if I stole from any song, the song it would be is the religious song. Oh, come on. What's the religious... Oh, Happy Day. Oh, happy day. Oh, happy day, my sweet Lord. I can't sing. So he... that was overturned some years later. I get torn about those kind of lawsuits. Sometimes I totally like it when someone rips someone off, they get sued for it, because, come on, be original. But a lot of rock and roll does sound similar. Anyway, that's another video. So when Harrison leaves Capitol, leaves Apple, goes to Warner Brothers, Capitol puts out this best of with that phallic cover image. What the fuck is that, right? And a lot of Harrison freaks like myself were disappointed because they feel Capitol felt the need to add some Beatles songs on here. Come on, it's a solo George Harrison best of, and even though I like While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and I like For You Blue and Taxman and Think for Yourself and Here Comes the Sun, something, and side one are Beatles songs. There were great songs they could have put on, even some B-side things, instead of packing it with Beatles songs. It made them look cheaper. This is a UK import, which has pretty much the same track lineup. I think it's a better cover, actually, right? You all know George was into a race car driving, too. This is one of my favorite and one of the best sounding George Harrison records, his self-titled record. And it has Not Guilty, which you probably all know now, those of you Beatle collectors and buyers. Those of you who bought the recent White Album 50th anniversary, one of the outtakes of that George wrote that's on the box set, it's on this box set, is Not Guilty. And so Harrison redid it for this album. Also on here is A Blow Away, which was a single, and Faster, which was a single. Great song about race car driving. This is a very good record. So if you're into want some George, you don't have a lot of George, I suggest self-titled George Harrison. And the reissue that came out, the George Harrison reissues, 3 years ago, it's the best sounding of all his records. Somewhere in England. Another pretty good song. Teardrops, a great single, really kind of a great dance beat to it. Probably he does a great copy of Baltimore Oriole on here, which is a cover song. He likes those old, like he did in True Love on 33 1/3. He likes those kind of, I don't say dance hall songs from the 40s. What's the name of the piano player that wrote that? You know who that is. Come on, help me out. Baltimore Oriole. Who wrote Baltimore Oriole? We're going to find out together. because I know that and I just can't remember. Ba-dum, Baltimore Oriole. Well, co-authored, but the person I was thinking, Hoagie Carmichael. You should get a Hoagie Carmichael album. He's been in films from the 40s, 1940s. Great singer, piano player. But the song on here that was also the initial hit this was the first album George put out after John Lennon died. And so there's a song called All Those Years Ago on here. And it's one of the few songs that 3 out of the 4 Beatles play on post the Beatles. So Paul and Linda sing harmonies, Ringo plays drums, and obviously George sings the lead All Those Years Ago. So George Harrison, Somewhere in England. I think this is this is actually a painting he's standing against. That's in, was it the National, not the National Portrait Gallery, one of the museums in London. And then we go to Gone Troppo. This is my promo Quaix 2 version. That's a formula that I think it was mostly Warner Brothers or we used. It's supposed to be a better vinyl composition, things like that. And a lot of George Harrison records, they all have 4 or 5 great tracks, then they're problematic. What's interesting about this is that some people they were reminded of this album because of the latest Paul McCartney record, Egypt Station. Look at that. Very similar, I mean, obviously the same color palette, right? Is Paul channeling George for his artwork? Because Paul did do that painting. I wonder if he was thinking of this. We'll never know. Gone Troppo. All right, as we move along, okay. I might have skipped 1 or 2, but George Harrison had a huge comeback around the time CDs were really coming into its own, and that, I bet you that helped too. You know, Dire Straits put out Brothers in Arms and becomes the biggest selling initially biggest selling compact disc. Well, George Harrison reached out to Jeff Lynne. This is my copy. I have a sealed copy and an open. Of course I do. Maslov. Produced by Jeff Lynne and George Harrison. Cloud 9 with Eric Clapton on a guitar, great track. When We Was Fab was one of the singles, which was Ringo plays on. Great sort of Beatle parody in a way. Devil's Radio. Got My Mind Set on You was the initial single, and Godley and Krem directed that video with the moving clocks and moose heads and rocking chair and things. So this was basically his comeback. And because of this, there was a little song that he recorded around this time with some of his friends. And he recorded it with his friends. And he went into Warner Brothers and was going to put it as a B-side on a single. And I don't know if it was Mo Austin or some of the Warner Brothers folks decided, wait a second, that song's too good for a B-side. Well, the song was Handle with Care, and it was with George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Jeff Lynne, Tom Petty, and Roy Orbison. So he put together the Traveling Wilburys. You know, that's another whole story and history. And box set of the Traveling Wilburys with, this is a Traveling Wilburys 3, which pretty much is like a Python joke because there was never a Traveling Wilburys 2. So that's, I'm not gonna talk about outtakes and, actually, one more. I gotta talk about a couple more here. The record he was working on when he died, Brainwash, and Danny, his son, and Jeff Lynne finished it off. This is a beautiful record. There's some beautiful Indian touches in it, especially with Marwa blues, but a lot of, George Harrison really kind of switched in the late 60s and almost primarily played slide guitar, and there's a lot of that on here. Beautiful recordings. This is a Best of Dark Horse Years collection, which really sounds great, that Warner Brothers put out. And this is Early Takes Volume 1. Now, this has been around for how many years? 2011. And there hasn't been a Volume 2 yet. These are basically outtakes and things, demos, alternate versions. Was the basis, the soundtrack for the documentary Martin Scorsese produced and directed. So I think it's on Netflix, but it's worth checking out. I'm not a huge fan of it, but it's worth checking out. And that's pretty much it in terms of my George Harrison collection. This is kind of an impromptu thing. For the indie circuit, was kind of a fun thing. This was a one-night live gig, George Fest, to celebrate the music of George Harrison. Danny put it together, but it's got Conan O'Brien doing "Oh Brown Shoe," Brett Daniel, "I Me Mine," Jonathan Bates and Danny Harrison, "Ballad of Sir Frankie Crisp," Nora Jones doing "Something," Brendan Flowers, "Got My Mind Set on You," Ian Astbury, "Be Here Now," Jamestown Revival, "If I Needed Someone," Black Rebel Motorcycle Club doing "Art of Dying," Annie Wilson from Heart, "Beware of Darkness," Ben Harper, "Give Me Love," Nora Jones, "Behind That Locked Door," "What Is Life" by Weird Al Yankovic, Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, "My Sweet Lord," on and on and on and on and on. "It's All Too Much." That's a fun version by the Flaming Lips. Anyway, kind of one of those tribute records that not for everybody, but actually you should seek out. There's a video. Watch the video. You don't really need to buy the record. Find the video. I don't know where you can find it online somewhere. You kids find stuff online, so find the video online and seek it out. So I just felt like honoring the Harrison family today. Again, not planned, not... oh, one last thing. Radha Krishna Temple, produced by George Harrison. Great record. Very Indian Krishna music. Again, I like world music, and I love that kind of stuff. So George Harrison loves you wherever he is, and Mazzy loves you, and he's right here. Thank you. Jai Guru Deva Om. Oh, that's it. It's so ironic that John wrote that. Obviously, he swiped it, but it's interesting that that's in a John song and not a George song. Anyway, Mazzy out. Mazzy loves you.